The initial idea was to take a snapshot of the community in Cardiff, having been established 60 years ago.
I became interested in part because at Newtown History and Art Centre we're interested in doing oral histories, life stories and portraits of people from a wide range of ethnic groups.
We wanted people to speak for themselves. The name of the project is Hineni, which is Hebrew for Here I Am, and we wanted people to say Here I Am, and the only way they can do that is through telling their own stories.
We have such an interesting cross-section of people coming from many parts of the globe that it seemed a pity not to find out why they'd all ended up in Cardiff and part of this vibrant community.
So one of the things I really liked about the project is that when we started we thought it was about capturing the stories of our community.
We have a lot of characters. It's that it works with the young, across the age range. It's like an extended family.
But it's also developed, and the way it's developed is to show the diversity of our community.
Something I like about being Jewish and Welsh. Well, to be honest with you, I think the one thing I think is equal in both, and that's a sense of family and sense of community.
Well, I think that when I look back to the days, I just remember, I think, the warmth of my family but the whole community, I think probably was like it was in the valleys with non-Jewish people as well.
It's all about being part of a family, and in Cardiff having your friends around you and enjoying festivals.
There's a couple of photos here of the wedding. In this shot, obviously, we've got the chuppah, which is decorated here, and my parents and Gary's parents standing underneath chuppah. We're married sort of by at this point because we've just gone here to sign the Jewish marriage certificate called the ketubah.
My family had initial misgivings about me not getting married in a synagogue, but once we explained that you could get married under the wedding canopy anywhere, and you can get married outside or inside, I think they embraced it.
And what we wanted to do with the project was to some extent capture the lives of members of our community.
To show how much a part of the community in South Wales, this group of refugees or people who came here for work or people that migrated from the valleys to Cardiff, why we were here and how we've integrated in the wider community, because I think our identity was more pronounced originally than it is now.
When we arrived here, we weren't really able to speak. I mean, all our conversations in the hostel were obviously in German. When we arrived, we were writing home at least once a week, maybe even twice a week, and receiving post from home. But once the war started, of course, all that stopped. My father was sent to, well, my whole family was sent to Poland. There's no actual record of when it happened. But it happened.
I was born in London. My father was interned, he came back, and we moved first of all to Llwydcoed, a little village outside of Aberdare. But on the Saturday I wasn't allowed to ride the bike, I wasn't allowed to do the scooter, the only thing I was left to do was read. I knew my mother had a twin sister, and I was always made as a child to write, although I'd never met these people, to write something. And that's my mother.
The positive thing about the project has been the unexpected things, because at the beginning I thought, well, we'd just have people's stories, but I think not only have we got the stories, we've got the photographs, which we weren't thinking of when we started. It's also, I think, been unexpected to find gems in people's stories.
it was not only my parents who played, but my brothers, and we used to literally queue up for the piano, for use of the piano. So music has played a very great role all through my life, and continues to do so. And my parents always told me that my mother's village was burnt in Russia. So when I've heard people uttering things about immigrants, I think, there go I. I identify immediately.
I was arrested in Doornfontein, which was a Jewish, mixed Jewish, coloured Indian suburb of Johannesburg. The Freedom Charter was adopted on the June the 25th and 26th, 1955 at Kliptown near Johannesburg, and I was a delegate from the University of the Witwatersrand to that conference, and some of the ideas here have been adopted in the new Constitution of South Africa.
We are obviously a faith community, so to people's different approaches to faith is very interesting.
The Reformed community has been in Cardiff for just over 60 years. At one time there were Jewish communities all over the South Wales valleys. Every community had a small Jewish community, a small synagogue. And over the years, those communities have dwindled.
The community I grew up in Merthyr, and we're talking round about when I can remember, in the 50s and maybe early 60s, it was a very small community. It maybe had 25 families. Although we only had 25 families, we had a full-time minister. This is the Merthyr Show, and as you can see, this is where I had spent a lot of my childhood. We kept the Friday night going until there was literally 10 Jews and men left in Merthyr, and towards the very end, the 10th person, a Jewish male there, he was 88 and very ill, and we used to go on Friday night, instead of being in our synagogue, we used to go up to his bedside to have minyan. I remember mitzvah well. All of my family from all around the country came down, and the shul was full. This is the bimmer. This is the shul itself in Merthyr. This is where as a mitzvah boy I would have read my parsha.
Adonai sifata tiftach ufia gizehilata. Ha Adonai sifata tiftach ufia.
We're going to have a Friday night dinner, traditional Shabbos dinner, and then Saturday morning is the bar mitzvah. Saturday night is the party.
Beshiftacha bevitecha, uveftacha v'derech, ushaftacha uvkumecha. Well, I like being with my friends and learning the history of Israel.
Seeing him do the same thing I did, and there's a bond there. I stood up there and watched my hands shake on the side of the bimmer as I was reading, and it was an emotional time. I'm looking forward to it.
We all took a portion of the Haftorah as well, which we did in Hebrew. And I loved every moment of it. Yes, I was nervous, but once I was up there, I loved it.
My bar mitzvah actually took place on the 22nd day of October 1938 in this beautiful synagogue called the Glockengasse. And this was 2 weeks and a couple of days before Kristallnacht. It was burned and destroyed together with lots of other synagogues, and this was just over 2 weeks after my bar mitzvah, and therefore mine was the last to take place in this particular synagogue.
There have been a huge number of different people involved, from 57 people who we've interviewed to the different people actually doing it, At one time we had 9 volunteers doing the interviews.
The Yiddish that my bubba used obviously went into my subconscious somehow, because it comes out now. I find myself coming out with Yiddish words frequently.
The synagogue where I belonged when I was a child, Edgware Reform Synagogue in London, had bar and bat mitzvahs every single week.
Joanna was always interested in Israel, Nathaniel not so much. And when she was in her, well, right through actually, she had Jewish friends up in university in Manchester, and they got talking, and they did a schnat. They did a 9 months away in Israel.
It was a lively life. And my greatest memory is there was obviously a shortage of money. My father couldn't keep in work permanently. He was often working as a skilled fur cutter, and he could be put off at a moment's notice.
At that stage then I realised I could actually have a wedding which not only obviously was a Jewish wedding, but where I could incorporate a lot of, you know, my own Welsh heritage.
A Jew coming to West Wales. Well, I had a wonderful welcome from Tracy's family, and they made me feel welcome both as a Jew and as an Englishman, so that's very important to remember. I think they were more worried about my English roots than my Jewish roots.
And Rabbi Charles very kindly said, you know, I'll come down and marry you. And so that's where the idea came from. And obviously my parents were delighted. Da iawn, tra bod chi wedi bod yma yn y synagogue. Ydych chi wedi mwynhau? Dod, fantastic. Ond mae'r rhaid i ddweud, so that's where the whole idea of bringing a Jewish wedding to Wales came about.
My father won the Bardic chair in Johannesburg for his poetry in English for a poem called The Gates of Dawn in 1922. It says, one against the world. The bard stands out against the world. Igur in erbyn I byd.
We were, all of us, so grateful to be in a country where we were allowed and educated and received.
So I'm in South Africa, in Wales, and South Africa is in Wales, in me. So all those identities are somehow, in a strange way, creatively integrated.
I've worked with many different ethnic groups, different continents and so on. And the more I do that kind of work, the more I become convinced that people are basically the same.
I thought the community gave us all a very strong sense of identity in who we are.
That all communities have diversity. And I think that that's important for people to realize, because people tend to stereotype people. And so I want to show diversity.
There is something that unites us, and the thing that unites us is belonging to this community. That commonality and that diversity is something wonderful that I think has come out of the project.